Welcome back, Honors. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom and our continuing discussion of the Byzantine Empire, right? We're about to talk about two really big themes in this, but I'm also grading your tests, so I'm not going to be able to record something brand new, so I'm going to use the flips that I recorded last year, and they're actually really, really good, so make sure you pay really good attention. And first of all, we're going to start off by talking about the Byzantine, right? Wrapping up all that stuff, starting off with the rulership of this guy named Justinian. Make sure you focus, okay? But here we go. That you could find in Constantinople, which made them very wildly wealthy. And as you can see, looking at their architecture, looking at their architecture, looking at their art, looking at all these other things about them, they're going to grow very, very wealthy very, very quickly. Now, they particularly grow super, super wealthy pretty soon after the fall of Western Rome under this leader by the name of Justinian, right? So Justinian is the guy that comes along, not right after Constantine, but about 200 years after Constantine, and he brings Byzantine to almost the former height of the Western Roman Empire, right? Justinian was a phenomenally good leader, and he was a very phenomenally important person. And shout out Molly real quick, we're going to be talking about a very important woman in his life as well, right? So the big thing about it, though, is Justinian is going to rule from 526 AD to 565 AD. About 40 years worth of ruling, and he is going to bring the Byzantine Empire to its absolute heights, right? He's going to rebuild Constantinople in grand style, so it looks like the money that it possesses, right? One of the most famous actual places that he built in this empire was this place called the Hagia Sophia, which to this day is considered a very important landmark for a lot of Christians to actually go and check out. It's actually on my top 10 I gotta see it before I die list, right? It is still in the city that is formerly known as Constantinople, except it's not called Constantinople anymore. It's actually called Istanbul, and some of y'all have probably heard this song that actually talks about how it's not Constantinople, it's Istanbul now.
Istanbul was Constantinople, now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople, been a long time gone. Constantinople, now it's Turkish delight on a moonlit night.
Exactly, right? So the thing about it is the Hagia Sophia was built under the reign of Justinian, and it was architecturally massive, right? Look at the top of these noggins right here, and look how large this temple is. Now, interesting little thing about it, though, is some of you are like, wait a minute, Mr. Terry, those are Arabic symbols that are actually all over the place. So is this a Christian temple, or is this a mosque? We'll get into more of that a little bit later. It's a mosque now, but it used to be a Christian temple. And actually, it was so well designed with all these giant windows up here at the top of the dome itself of the Hagia Sophia that you can see around its edge, that when the sun shines inside of it and you look straight up at it, you can't see the retaining walls on the outside. So everybody said it looked like the dome of the Hagia Sophia. It was so beautiful that it was being held up by a chain from heaven, right? So the thing about it, though, about Justinian, he is going to be the guy that is responsible for rebuilding Constantinople in this grand style, for making it like the Byzantine look like all the money that it actually had. Another big thing that he's going to do that's going to forever change society is he's going to invent this thing underneath his reign known as the Justinian Code, right? A law code that's going to be very, very important. It's going to be modeled off of the old version of Roman law, the 12 tables. But what's very important about his is it's a civil law code. Now, as we know, one bad thing about the Western Roman Empire is that laws didn't apply to everybody the exact same way. If you were a senator and you stabbed my boy Caesar to death, you didn't get charged with murder because you were a patrician, right? Now, civil law, on the other hand, what Justinian creates, is actually going to be a law that applies to everybody, regardless of their class, right? So it's very important that you understand that concept, and that this tome that he creates is going to be a unifying characteristic of his empire, and it's going to keep them together for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? So just remember, civil law, Justinian Code, very, very important. Now, speaking of Justinian, though, as well, he was an emperor or an autocrat is what you can refer to him as, right? The thing about being an emperor and autocrat means you are a sole ruler with complete authority, right? And so whatever Justinian said is what happened. He did not share his rule with other republican styles of government like other emperors that had actually came before him. But the thing about it, though, about Justinian is he had complete ownership and rule over the church. He had rule over the entire government. He had rule over the lives of everyday citizens, right? And going forward, why was he so powerful, right? Why? A lot of it has to do with the fact that Western Rome fell. And so, of course, in the absence of Western Rome, his autocratic rule is going to be successful. So people are going to keep listening to him. But the other reason is because he had a very, very close advisor. A very good advisor that told him what to do 9 times out of 10. So really, why was Justinian so powerful? It's because he was supported by a very powerful woman, right? A woman by the name of Theodora, right? His wife, who actually kept him very, very close by and was his main advisor. She was a ruthless politician, and she was Justinian's main co-counsel and advisor. She actually helped him to solve so many problems that broke out throughout the entire area, right? When a plague happened inside of the Byzantine Empire, she helped him quell it and actually keep him alive. Actually, also interesting fact about that plague, Justinian himself got the plague of Constantinople that actually broke out underneath him. It was called the plague of Justinian at the entire time. He got this sickness and didn't die because Theodora kept him safe, right? And then also as well, there was this giant revolt that broke out all over Constantinople that almost spelled the end of Justinian's rule. Justinian almost ran away during these things called the Nika riots, right? And the Nika riots were actually during this era when there were these chariot racing teams, a blue team and a green team, that revolted against the high taxes that Justinian had put on them and stuff like that, and they are going to try and take over the entire city. And Justinian looked at Theodora during these riots being like, should we run? Should we flee? Should we go back to the old Rome and try to restart? And she looked at him and said, no royal runs. I would rather die an empress than die on the run, right? And she said, you know what makes a fantastic thing to be buried in? Royal purple is a fantastic thing to be buried in, right? And that is Theodora right there, just being absolutely so tough and stuff like that, not playing around about this stuff. And she actually came up with the idea to stop the riots, right? And she was like, oh, you want to know what the best thing to do to stop these riots would be? Bribe one of the teams, kill the other one. See who takes the bribe first, right? So they actually bribed the blue team and killed the rest of the green team, right? Theodora don't mess around, all right? So the big thing about that as well is that there was a very strong military underneath the reign of Justinian and Theodora that had a weapon that no one had ever seen. They had a massive army, and they also had a navy equipped with a weapon that no one else in the world had. And it was known as Greek fire, right? And this is actually what a modern representation of Greek fire looks like.
Did you know that Byzantine fireships were the top secret super weapons of their age? That a large bronze container containing the mixture was heated from below by a flame and pressurized by a pump. An outlet valve then allowed the liquid to race up and out through a nozzle, where a pilot flame ignited the fluid, bathing the target in a fire hose of flames.
Yeah, it's this really intense, like, oil-based flamethrower device that the Greeks actually used, or like, excuse me, not the Greeks, but that the Greek-speaking Byzantine Empire used against their enemies, right? And the interesting thing about it as well is that actually it doesn't get put out when you put water on it. It actually gets worse, right? So interesting little things about it, though, is that these two figures are going to bring them up to absolute power, right? But after Theodora and Justinian died. We actually believe that Justinian died from just natural causes. And we think Theodora actually in her later years got cancer and actually passed away. But problems are going to hit the Byzantine after Justinian, right? So Justinian brought them to a very, very large height. Like if we jump back right here and look at this map, he retook all of these different areas, right? And almost reestablished what the Western Roman Empire used to be, right? So looking at this gigantic swath of land that he took over, look at that red line. That's how much Justinian owned. But then after Justinian, by about 1,000 years later, give or take, it's beginning to shrink. And then by the empire, like in 1360, it's only this big. So Justinian, following his rule, the empire begins to kind of slowly shrink and get very, very small. Because they're going to get hit by a series of different problems, right? Big things including the fact that they were attacked a lot. Why would they be attacked so much? Because they were that trade hub, right? They were that wealthy place. They were the center of economic activity that was going on in Europe during this time period. They had food and resources and all these different things. So these other barbarian tribes are going to decide to try and attack these places, right? The Huns, led by Attila, are going to attack it at one point. The Slavs, the Persians, the Turks, these other group of people known as the Vikings are going to try and raid different parts of Constantinople at different points, and they're going to siege the city in massive waves of attack, right? So the thing about it, though, going forward as well, is they're also going to be weakened by a religious movement that happened underneath them, right? Now, it's a very interesting thing because today the church is much stronger because of this movement and stuff like that, but a massive event in 1053 went down known as the Great Schism, right? So the Great Schism is going to be an event that happened in the Byzantine Empire that's very important, and as they're getting weaker and stuff, this event is going to change the landscape of Christianity forever. And it's very important that you know it. And you're not only going to learn about it in my class, you're going to learn about it in Mr. Mathern's class, right? And the church in the Byzantine Empire that was the original Christian church, just the original church that was just like Christianity, one church, one thing, is going to split into two new churches, known as an Eastern church and a Western church after Justinian. And it's mostly due to the differences in worship across the empire, right? And it's what leads to these two churches being called the Roman Catholic Church, because it moved over here to what is now Rome in the modern day era, and that's why St. Peter's is located in Rome, and the Roman Catholic Church is known as the Roman Catholic Church. and the other one is known as the Eastern Orthodox Church, right? And Eastern Orthodoxy is very, very different. This right here is the Greek Orthodox Church that is actually located at the top of City Park in New Orleans, right? So we even have Orthodox churches inside of our own city, right? And the big thing about it, though, is why did they split? Some of you are like, Mr. Terry, I like what you're getting at. I like that you're telling me where Catholicism comes from, and I love that you're talking about the Eastern Orthodox Church as well. But where did these disagreements come from? Why did they split? It's a really, really That's a really, really great question there, Chapman. I like that question. That's good stuff, right? Well, the thing about it is, it's because of bread, popes, the sun, and some images, right? So the real thing about it that you need to understand is I actually went off and commissioned a very nice guy to text me and tell me what actually went down in this. As you can see, this is Mr. Mathern right here, and I texted him and I was like, what are the disagreements that led to the East-West schism, big fella? And he told me all of this stuff right here, and we just kind of whittled it down into a few causes. Because like I said, you're going to talk about it in his class a little bit again as well, right? So going into it, though, as we all know, Mr. Mathern, just what an absolute godsend. I know. What a good guy. So the big thing about it that he told me in this text message, though, is that actually the biggest disagreements between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics was the fact that actually, one, bread. Leavened versus unleavened, right? The Catholics believe that bread should be taken in unleavened form, or the thin pieces of the host that y'all actually have at Mass. And then also the Eastern Orthodox were like, no, leavened bread is fine, and they actually soaked it in wine, actually, before they take their Eucharist, right? Popes, the Eastern Orthodox doesn't like popes, the Roman Catholics did, right? The Son is this thing called the Filioque controversy, right? Whereas, for example, Catholics say in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Eastern Orthodoxy does not say that. And also imagery as well, because Eastern Orthodox people believe that you have to be very careful about the number of images and icons you use inside of a church, right? So the big thing about it, though, is even after all these big events, after being attacked, after Justinian, after Constantine, after all that stuff, the Byzantine is going to begin to fall, right? They're going to fall towards the end of the medieval period, and their fall marks the end of the medieval period, actually. The Crusades that started in 1090 are going to dramatically weaken the Byzantine Empire, right? And we'll talk more about Crusades and stuff like that as well when we get into what's going on in medieval Europe. But that's going to leave them super, super weak, as you can tell, as the Crusades pass through Constantinople and were tried to being fought over the Holy Land down here known as Jerusalem. It's going to leave the Byzantine Empire very, very weak. Constantinople, though, is also going to fall in 1453 AD to the hands of these people known as the Ottoman Turks, right? And they're going to be turned into what's known as the Ottoman Empire. Today, after it fell, right, the name was changed to Istanbul. So Constantinople, after it fell in 1453, was no longer called Constantinople. It's now called Istanbul, right? And it's the capital of a country known as Turkey, because it was taken over by the Ottoman Turks, right? So looking into it, though, that is the Byzantine Empire. That is the reign that was the Byzantine Empire. And when we get back to class on Monday and Tuesday, we will be talking about the Eastern Golden Age. So I'll see y'all then. Y'all have a good one. Also, real quick, we're about to talk about something else, okay? So something you have to realize and understand is that there are two or three, actually, really big areas in the world, and they were all going through very large different things at the exact same time, right? From about like 500 AD to about 1450 AD. We're going to see Western Europe going through the Middle Ages, Eastern Europe going through what is known as the Byzantine Empire, and then what we're about to talk about in the second half of this flip is what's going on in the Indian Ocean, also known as the Monsoon Marketplace, which is actually the Eastern Golden Age, all right? Well, go ahead and watch that. We'll wrap that up from here. I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. All right, exactly. Thank you very much, Mr. Terry Me, from last year. But the big thing about it, though, is we also got to talk about a couple of more parallels that are going on at the exact same time, right? So after we talked about the Byzantine Empire, we need to know kind of where it's located, and we need to know also what's going on either side of it, okay? So looking at this world map really quick, if we are looking at the world, the globe, the entirety of world history rather than Western civilization's history, from the years of about 500 to 1500 AD, we need to understand that there's a lot of stuff going on. The one big problem about learning Western civilization's history is that we tend to get very myopic from time to time. Now, myopathy or myopia, myopic means that we are focusing way too much on one place. And a lot of this coursework and a lot of this course material tends to focus on Europeans and the impacts that they had on other people, right? Well, the thing about it is Europeans are culturally homogenous, right? And they are, of course, going to have major impacts on the rest of the world. But the big thing about it that we need to understand is that during this time period where they were going through their trials and tribulations of a dark age, quote unquote, yes, it's not really clearly a dark age. I'm very, very aware. Any medieval historian that's watching this right now, preparing to leave me some angry comment. All right, so big thing that we need to understand, though, is from the years of 500 to 1500 AD, some people were actually having a golden age, while the Middle Ages was actually really, really rough for Western Europeans. Now, when we're looking at this world map, though, we can kind of go ahead and negate these two places, okay? There are things happening. There are things going on. The Aztecs and the Mayas and the Incas are beginning to establish themselves and things like that during this time period. But what we need to understand more than anything else is that as of right now, there's not a ton of recorded history from these two continents right there. Not a lot of stuff going on that we can actually kind of look at and really use as concrete evidence, right? But we can focus on this half of the world real quick. And from the years of 500 to 1500 AD, you got three different things going on all at the exact same time, right? Now, in this area, which is the former western half of the Roman Empire, you have what's called the Middle Ages going on from the 500 to 1500 AD, right? That transitional time period between ancient stuff and modern stuff, right? And that middle is going to be between it. So we got the ancient time periods with Greece and Rome. You got the modern era starting with the Renaissance. The Middle Ages are that like big chunk of time, that 1,000 years chunk of time there in the middle. Now, we just got done talking about these guys. That's the Byzantine Empire, right? The Byzantine Empire, aka the former eastern half of Rome. And if you walked up to one of them and asked where they're from, they would say, I am Roman. Now, the thing that we need to focus on, though, right now is what's going on in this other big chunk over here. And, well, that's none other than this thing that we like to refer to sometimes as the Eastern Golden Age or the Monsoon Marketplace, right? So something that we need to understand that's going on in this world is that during this time period, from about 500 to 1500 AD, during this time period, Europeans, yes, they were struggling, y'all. Gonna really, really have some like struggles. They're gonna have to have barbarian tribes resettle the rest of the entire continent of Europe. The Catholic Church is gonna grow really powerful and get kind of corrupt and stuff like that as time goes on. But the other big thing that's gonna go on in the eastern half of the world is they're going to have a golden age, right? And some historians and some people who teach history tend to sometimes also refer to this as that Monsoon Marketplace, right? So most of the eastern kingdoms that you see circled inside of this big like area, this big frame or whatever on this map, you've got people like the eastern coast of Africa, you've got the Arabic kingdoms and the Southeast Asians. When we're looking at them, they're actually having a very, very profitable and very, very big like actual golden age that takes place mostly in the Indian Ocean. Now the thing about it that is the key waterway that all these different areas share, is that Indian Ocean. Now, the key thing that we also need to understand, though, too, is looking at that nickname for this area, the Monsoon Marketplace, that tells us two things. One, marketplace delineates the idea that they're making some money, right? Okay, something we need to understand about golden ages is that you have to understand is that, like, golden ages typically come off high economic times, right? Periods of high economic gain where people are making lots of money and doing very, very well for themselves. Now, the Monsoon Marketplace, right, is awesome, but what about that word monsoon, right? Marketplace tells us they're making money, but what does that word monsoon mean, right? Monsoon, actually, a lot of people think it means rain, right? A lot of people think it means rain because they might have seen Forrest Gump before and seen, like, the footage of him in Vietnam, and, like, of course, he's like, it's a big old fat rain. But, like, the thing about that we need to understand when we're getting at this is monsoons cause rain, but they are not actually rain themselves. What monsoons are actually seasonal winds that change direction about every 6 months, especially like taking hold in the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia, Arabic kingdoms, and also Eastern Africa, right? Now, these monsoons, though, these seasonal winds do tend to cause massive rainstorms and stuff like that, leading to a wet and a dry season. But I want you to think for a hot second that you're an individual that lives in one of these kingdoms from about the years of 500 to 1500 AD. How could you use these winds to move across this water and make tons and tons of money? Well, the thing about it is that since they change direction every single, basically 6 months, is the people that lived in the areas that bordered the Indian Ocean would spend 6 months bouncing from one place to the other as the winds blew like westward, and then after the next 6 months, after they traded a lot of different stuff, picked up a lot of new items, made a lot of money, they would then travel back, right? Making a ton of money for their civilizations and leading to the progression of sciences, learnedness, and is also leading to their golden age, right? So something that we need to understand, though, is who are these people that are making tons and tons of money during this time period? Well, we have three particular groups of people that are making large advancements and also large sums of cash during this time period. They being the African kingdoms, the Asiatic kingdoms, and the Arabic kingdoms, right? So when we're looking at the African kingdoms, we need to focus on the things that all these people were trading, because the Africans had certain items that the Asians didn't have, the Asians had certain items that the Arabics and Africans didn't have, and we've actually found evidence of Asiatic items in like places like Ethiopia. Chinese porcelain has been discovered in Ethiopia that was being traded around this time, right? So the African kingdoms would provide lots of different things. Particularly, they would provide these three items, right? Salt, gold, and silver. Now, gold and silver, obvious why you would want those things. They're the basis of most currencies. But the thing about salt, right? Why was salt worth so much money, and why were Asiatic people and Arabic people so willing to try and grab a hold of this stuff? Well, the thing about it that you need to understand is salt was actually at the time worth its weight in gold because it can be used both as a preservative, right, to preserve your food and things like that, and also because if you don't have any salt in your diet, you're going to die, because it actually helps you regulate your fluid balance within your cells and also the fluid balance within your entire body. So salt was a very, very major thing. Now, if we actually look at the African kingdoms as well, you have to understand the richest man in all of history is actually from one of these African kingdoms during this Eastern Golden Age. So following his conversion to Islam and stuff like that, his name would be none other than Mansa Musa. Write that down. M-A-N-S-A, Mansa Musa, M-U-S-A, right? Mansa Musa was the richest man that history ever knew, and he was an African king, right? And that picture right there of him is actually a picture of him on medieval maps and some other different maps that were actually circulating during the time period because everybody knew who this guy was and everybody knew where he was. It's kind of like how everybody knows who Bill Gates is, right? Or everybody knows who Elon Musk is, right? Everybody knew who Mansa Musa was because he was just that rich, right? And we'll talk about why he was that rich and kind of how he caused inflation in places he traveled to during class, though, okay? But the Asiatic kingdoms, though, are going to be selling some things and trading some things as well, particularly things like silks, spices, and science. Now, really, really quickly, silks and spices, those make a lot of pretty easy sense, right? Silks are a textile that's very, very precious. It's a luxury item. Spices are something that can also be used for preservatives, medicinal qualities, perfumes, and also flavoring food and meat. But science, how do you trade science? No one walks up to somebody and says, hey, I'll buy 6 pieces of science off you. That's not really how it works, right? But the thing about it, though, is the Asiatic kingdoms weren't selling scientific advancement, but it was culturally diffusing throughout the Indian Ocean during this time period. So scientific advancement hit a very, very high note in the Asiatic kingdoms during this Monsoon marketplace period. One of the most famous things they invented during this time period that actually relates to the scientific advancement of the Asiatic kingdoms is around 900 AD during the Monsoon marketplace / Eastern Golden Age period. They invented gunpowder. Now, gunpowder would be very, very important, is going to be then used as a military technology and then also in fireworks and performance arts and things like that, right? Now, looking into it, though, that we also need to know, also apparently during the Asiatic kingdom period, they strapped a bunch of them to a chair and tried to shoot a guy into the air, which is really, really awesome, but we'll talk about that in a little bit later on. That's good science when you think about it. Let's throw that guy up there. Now, the other last one, though, are the Arabic kingdoms, right? Now, the Arabic kingdoms, though, by this point in time, by about 610 AD, are going to almost universally convert to Islam, all right? So keep that in the back of your mind, all right? We'll talk about that more as this unit goes on, because we will do a very in-depth discussion about Islam and talk about why that faith is so cool and why it actually relates heavily to Christian and Judaic values, right? So when we're looking at the Arabic kingdoms, though, that had recently converted to Islam, they were responsible for doing a lot of things as well, particularly the development of accounting. They developed and created the number 0. They developed algebra so they could actually figure out how to do works with money and conversions and trade large items throughout this entire area. And then also, they came up with systematic trading, right? Trading that actually would move along certain trade routes and that would actually move more fluidly and more efficiently. And then also, because of this, because they made so much money and wealth, actually, the Muslim kingdoms and the Islamic kingdoms and then also the Arabic kingdoms developed the very first universities. An interesting little fact about this as well is the Arabic kingdoms are actually going to hold on to a lot of the developments that actually fell when Western Rome fell as well. So that Eastern Golden Age is very, very juxtaposed to what's going on in Western Europe, which is known as the Middle Ages, which some people refer to as a dark age, due to the fact that there was limited learning, poor leadership, and pretty bad economics, right? But we're going to talk about where that bias is and a couple other things in class. When I see y'all next time, I'll see y'all soon. Have a good one.